Good afternoon. Welcome to our about 7th, if you don't count last year, which nobody does, about 7th annual Medieval Christmas. We have such fun putting this together, and thank you all for coming and listening to us, and thank you all for watching online. And we're going to go through a number of pieces, and I'll give you some explanations about what they are and where they came from, and what's weird and different about this one. But we're going to start with a group of pieces that all the singers are going to join in on. So why don't you guys come on up and we'll get set up. The first thing we're going to do is from a collection called Pie Canciones. In 1585, they published this book in Helsinki, Finland, of a number of songs. Some of them were brand new and some of them had been around for quite a while. Most of the pieces, we don't know exactly how old they are, but we know they're at least that old. And this is one of them. The title is Verbum caro factum est.
Verbum caro factum est Virgine, verbum caro factum est Virgine Maria, in hoc anni saeculo, vita datus saeculo, natu nobis parulo de Virgine, natu nobis parulo de Virgine Maria, verbum caro factum est Virgine, verbum caro factum est Virgine Maria.
Okay. Thank you. Next is a 15th century piece called Noel, Out of Your Sleep, Arise and Wake. If I can find the right instrument. This strange looking thing is called a crumhorn, and we're going to do this piece with a couple of them. A crumhorn, named after the curve, like a shepherd's crook.
Upside down.
Vicky has a soprano and I have a bass.
well, know well.
So, you may have heard of a tune that goes do, re, mi, fa, sol. Okay, you may have heard those syllables done before. Do you have any idea where that came from? In the 10th century, a choir director named Guido of Arezzo wanted to teach his choir to sing new songs. But everyone knew at the time you couldn't write down music. You had to teach the song to somebody without, there's no way to write it down anyway. It couldn't be done. So he said, all right, how can I teach the intervals to the people? I mean, we all know now, if you want to learn what a fourth is, you sing, the eyes of Texas are upon you. And so that's a fourth, bum, bum. And so we've got these intervals in our head. At the time, they didn't. So they said, what's a really famous song that because frankly, they didn't all know Eyes of Texas in the 10th century.
What? No.
But they did all know the really famous hymn about St. John the Baptist. What's the really famous hymn about St. John the Baptist? Well, it's called Ut Coiantalaxis, and it goes like this. Let's see, please.
Wait a minute, when was Guido around?
10th century.
10th century, wow,
So-
900 and something.
Yeah, something. So more than 1,000 years ago is when he came up with this.
Wow.
Yeah. Can you give us a C to start with?
Utque ant laxis, resonare fibris, mirages corum, famuli tuorum, solve polluti, labire atum, sancte Johannes. Electromisi, dubidus superni, pedidit pronte, modulos nuquere, sede formasti, genitus perempte, organa vocis, sit decus patri, geniteque poli, et tibi prompta, utrius te virtus, Spiritus Semper, Deus unus omni, tempore servo. Amen.
So if you pay attention, in the first verse, the first note of each phrase goes like this.
Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la,
Sancte Johannes. So what do we do for the seventh of the scale? Well, let's use SI for Sancta Johannes, because everyone knows there's no such thing as a J, and so we spell John with an I. Yeah. So C later became T because that's easier to sing, and Ut is really hard to sing, so let's just make that a Do. And then we get the modern solfege syllables. But Guido of Arezzo taught people to use the famous hymn to do intervals, and that's where it came from. So let's look at a much more recent tune. 600 years later to the 15th century, There Is No Rose of Such Virtue.
Oops. Sorry.
There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew. There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew. There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew. For in this rose contained was heaven and earth in little stains. Praise be God. There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew. By that rose we may well see that he is God in persons three. There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew. The angels sang and the shepherds too. Glory on earth, excelsis Deo. There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew. Leave we all this worldly mirth and follow we this joyful birth. There is no rose of such virtue as is the rose that bears dew.
So there's a piece mentioned in Chaucer's Miller's Tale when he has one of his characters says he keeps a psaltery by his bedside so he can sing Angelus ad Virginem. So we thought, let's look it up. It turns out it's a really popular tune in the 14th century, and it first came over from France with a set of words in Latin, and it very quickly got a set translated into English. So we're going to do a verse in Latin, the original Angelus ad Virginem, and then a verse in English, Gabriel from Heaven King. Oh yeah. And I'm going to sit down and play.
want to tell them what you're playing?
So this is a 5-stringed instrument called a VL. It is, it's one of those that was really popular in the 14th and 15th centuries, and over the course of the 16th kind of died out as other ones became more common. The violin has such a strong tone, and it can overpower other instruments. And so these that were made with gut strings and have a little bit softer tone fairly quickly went out of fashion because they couldn't be heard over the dancers as well. So here we are, Angelus ad Virginem. glorie. Autem regis ambulabant, aurum thus miram potavant, immolabant ex insere, Leoni victoriae. Christo regite ornato per Mariam nobis stato, merito resonet vere, plus ecum melodiae. That's it. Singers, please go have a seat. We're going to let the choir take a break for a moment and do a couple of pieces with slightly different settings. The first of those we're going to do is a solo with harp on Maria Matram, followed by a harp solo on Drive the Cold Winter Away. Just
the Baltic Sea. A lot of times they're called Baltic psalteries.
Yeah.
And it's old, so.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. We return now to a source we used once before called the Trinity Roll. It is a collection of Christmas carols held at Trinity College in Cambridge. And it's a wonderful collection of two-part pieces. And so here's another one called Noel Sing We Both All and Some.
I'll play the note.
Noel sing we both all and some, now Rex Pacificus is come. Exhortum est in love and bliss, now Christ is great, he gan us kiss, and with his body us spotless bliss. Both all and some. Noel sing we both all and some, now Rex Pacificus is come. De fructus ventris of Mary bright, who gives us glory in her light. Out of disease he did us light. Both all and some. Noel sing we both all and some, now Rex Pacificus is come. For not to us was sent, to bliss us both, robing us bent, and else to woe we had he went. Both all and some. Noel sing we both all and some, now Rex Pacificus is come. Looks full debate with love and light, in merry mild his pen and pite, and her took kind with manly might. Both all Pacificus is come. Gloria tibi and bliss, God unto his grace he us wish, the rent of heaven that we not miss, both all and some. Nowhere sing we both all and some, now Rex Pacificus is come. Nowhere sing we both all and some, now Rex Pacificus is come.
It's always hard to do a piece with a solo or duet, and especially when it has weird rhythms like that. So, thank you. We're going to do one other piece from that same collection, but this one just on recorders. So, the text of this is, "Now may we singin' as it is." One and two. Ah, yes. Now I get to play the crumb horn again because it's just too much fun. So if you listen really, really carefully to this melody, you can hear how it evolved from this into the hymn we know as the Friendly Beasts. But if you look it up in the hymnal, the hymn name for that song is called Orientis Partibus. And so we're going to all stand up and sing this one together because it's just too good of a time. And this came from a French 12th century festival where they didn't celebrate Mary and Joseph and their travels, and they didn't celebrate the wise men bringing gifts. What they celebrated was the donkey who carried them. Yeah, so they had a whole party about the donkey, and so the chorus of this one goes, "Hey, hey, hey, Sir Asne, hey," which is, Sir Donkey. So we're going to sing about that with appropriately serious donkey crumb horns.
Yes, of course.
Ready?
going to start with The Burden, which we now call a chorus. So.
Nova Nova. Do you want to give us an intro? Please?
Nova, 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 Ave Diceva. Gabriel of high degree, he came down from Trinity to Nazareth in Galilee. Nova, 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 Ave Diceva. He met a maiden in a place, he kneeled down before the face and said, Hail Mary, full of grace. Nova, 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 Ave Diceva.
When the maiden saw this, she was so full of gratitude, knowing that she had done amiss.
Nova, 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 Ave Diceva. Just as the angel dread not do, she shall conceive in all the dew, a child whose name shall be Jesu. Nova, 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 Ave Diceva.
It is like a 6 months gone, since the days of conceiving time, as it was not born.
Nova, 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 Ave Diceva. That's the maiden.
Verily, when you so good like truly, it's an honor to see.
Nova, 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 Ave Diceva. Nova, 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 Ave Diceva.
As you might guess, Nova is Latin for news. So it's trying to, hey, celebrate, there's good news today. This next piece is one we know that the text is really old, but there's some doubt about this melody. Some people say it's 15th century to go along with the text. The manuscript in the British Museum, given by the Sloan Foundation, only has the words. So, did it go like this? Maybe. And I get to play the viol and do the intro I was trying to do earlier. love to end our performances with Coma Podin. Now, the secret to this song is we don't know how we're going to play it. A lot of medieval music was improvised, so it's rather like jazz in that way. And so that's just kind of how we do this piece.
There we go. Whoops.
Sometimes we end together. Thank you, singers. So that's our program of medieval Christmas music. I hope you enjoyed hearing some really old carols. Thank you.
The drummer's now warmed up. I think the drummer went on that one.
Yeah.